David straps on his sword and 400 horsemen do the same. They are not heading into battle with the Philistines. They are marching toward one house, one family, one rich fool who ran his mouth, and now every male in his household is close to dying for it. And this hits close because somewhere right now, pride is pointing at a sword in your hand and calling it righteousness. Maybe one cutting line at a family dinner turned the whole room cold. And on the drive home, you started building the speech that would make sure nobody talked to you like that again. That's how ordinary the situation can feel. Then one servant does something smart. He doesn't go to Nabal. He runs to Abigail because everybody knows whose wife is in that house. That's the point of this chapter. Wisdom restrains power before wounded pride becomes bloodshed. Abigail doesn't just calm David down. She protects his future. So rewind with me, because this chapter shows how quickly a calling can bend when pride is touched. The chapter opens with Samuel's death, and that matters not because the text says David snapped from grief. It doesn't. But the story begins under a shadow. Samuel is gone. The old order is cracking, and the prophet who saw David as more than a shepherd boy is no longer there. And here's the thing about that loss. It changes how you read everything David does next. Picture David out in the wilderness with that loss. Did David have time for quiet mourning? For settled grief? For a chance to stop and fall apart? The text does not tell us. What it does tell us is that this man still needed food, direction, and safety by morning. David is out there with about 600 men. And that number matters because this isn't just one offended guy having a bad day. He's carrying a whole moving camp while Saul is still hunting him. Pressure does not always create something new. A lot of times, it shows you what was already waiting under the surface. And the man who steps into that gap is precisely the wrong person to meet David under intense pressure. Because everything about Nabal is designed to make things worse, starting with his name. Then the story introduces Nabal, and the text wastes no time. He's rich, very rich, with thousands of sheep and goats, but he's also harsh and badly behaved. His name is tied to folly, and in the Bible, a fool isn't just a man with bad judgment. A fool is morally twisted, thick with pride, blind to what should be obvious. So before Nabal even opens his mouth, the narrator has already told you what kind of man this is. And right next to instant Abigail, she's described as discerning and beautiful. But more than that, the story shows that people trust her. That's big. In a crisis, the servant doesn't think, let me go reason with the master of the house. He thinks, let me find Abigail. That tells you she already carries weight in that household long before she ever rides out to meet David. Now the timing matters too. This event happens during sheep shearing, which was feast time, celebration time, a good day, the kind of day when generosity was expected. People ate, shared, and showed open-handedness because the season itself said abundance has come. So David doesn't send men to Nabal on a random Tuesday asking for free stuff. He sends them at the moment when hospitality should be easiest. And David's case isn't invented out of thin air. Nabal's own servants later say David's men were like a wall around the shepherds. That's real service, real protection. Out in the wilderness, where flocks could get stolen and workers could get hit, that kind of presence mattered. So whatever else we say, this was not a totally baseless request. Still, Nabal answers with contempt. Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? That's not confusion. That's dismissal. He's reducing David to a runaway servant, and nobody with no claim on him. This is how insecure power talks. It denies the good done for it. It erases the person in front of it, and it tries to shame them in public so it can stay on top a little longer. And David's response to that insult will expose something that Saul's spear had not. And David, who has shown startling restraint before Saul's violence, suddenly looks nothing like himself. But before you see what David says next, You need to feel how far this is from the man who refused to touch Saul. Because what comes out of his mouth isn't just anger. His oath is so crude that many English translations softens the literal wording. So David gives the order, strap on your swords. 400 men move out with him. And this isn't a pressure tactic anymore. He is on his way to kill people. And some of those men must have known it was wrong. However, when your leader is wounded and furious, loyalty can drag you where your conscience would never walk alone. And his words are rough on purpose. He swears that by morning he will leave so much as one male alive in Nabal's house. Not just Nabal, everybody tied to his line. When pride grabs the wheel, anger widens the target. This is why the chapter sits between two scenes where David refuses to kill Saul. There, he will not seize the throne by violence. Here, with a man far smaller than Saul, he nearly loses himself. Saul threatened his life. Nabal hit his honor. For many people, shame drives them more than fear ever could. Romans 12 fits right here. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but overcome evil with good. Most of us know that verse when we are calm. The test comes when revenge starts sounding righteous in our own heads. We don't admit that my ego got bruised. We call it principle. And Nabal almost works like an echo of Saul. He repays good with evil. But here's the sting. While Nabal mirrors Saul, David nearly mirrors Saul too. He is about to use armed force to settle a personal grievance and punish far beyond what is right. Scholars disagree about David's request. Some see an accepted expectation of reciprocal protection. Others hear the edge of coercion. The text gives us reason to understand why David expected generosity, but it does not require us to pretend his position was morally uncomplicated. What is uncomplicated is his response. One man's insult did not justify the destruction of an entire household. So the question is no longer whether Nabal deserves judgment. The question is whether David can be stopped before he stains his future with blood he was never meant to spill. And the person who gets through him will not be a prophet, a priest, or one of his fighters. It will be the woman everybody in that house already knows to trust. A servant runs to Abigail because everybody knows she's the one person in that house who can still think clearly. Nabal has money and control of the estate. Abigail has discernment. And in a crisis, people know the difference. She doesn't freeze, she moves. Bread, wine, dressed sheep, roasted grain, raisins and fig cakes. She brings what Nabal refused to give, because some messes don't cool down with words alone. Somebody has to bring repair. So don't flatten her into a quiet wife who spoke softly. What she does takes nerve, speed, planning, and the will to cross her husband's choice so evil does not spread. She rides toward 400 armed men. Courage doesn't mean calm. It means you move while fear is still in your chest. And then she speaks. Abigail is given one of the most substantial speeches attributed to a woman in the Hebrew Bible. And what makes it matter is not just its length, but its theology, its strategy, and the way it turns David back. She's about to do 5 things in one speech, and if she misses even one of them, this ends in blood. And the first one is the most dangerous move in the whole chapter. Proverbs 15:1 says, "A soft answer turneth away wrath." Soft does not mean weak. Abigail's gentleness is strength under control. First, she falls before David and says one of the wildest lines in the chapter. "On me alone be the guilt." She steps into the blast zone on purpose, not because Nabal is right, but because if nobody interrupts this moment, a lot of people die. Second, she tells the truth about Nabal. She doesn't cover him. She says, in effect, the man is acting exactly like his name. Third, She restores what Nabal denied. She brings the gift Nabal withheld. Fourth, she redirects David. She warns him against bloodshed and avenging yourself with your own hand. And fifth, she speaks to the future God promised him. If God is going to build your house, don't stain it with blood. Here's what that means for tomorrow morning. Then comes that line about David's life being bound in the bundle of the living in the care of the Lord your God. If your life is held by God, you do not have to secure it by destroying another person. You do not need retaliation to prove that you matter. You do not need another person's humiliation to recover your dignity. If David's future is held by God, Nabal's insult cannot cancel it. This isn't just ancient strategy. Imagine a couple on the edge of saying things they cannot take back. One partner feels dismissed, the other feels cornered. Instead of proving a point, one of them slows down the room, names what the other has been carrying, reminds them they are not enemies, and gives them a way to admit hurt without groveling. The whole thing turns. They still have a hard talk, but they have it without trying to win by hurting each other. And that is not just something to admire in Abigail. It's something you can use. Maybe you're not riding toward 400 armed men, but you do have tough talks in front of you. A marriage talk, a family talk, a church talk, a text you need to send without pouring gas on the fire. This is the Abigail Playbook. Restore what was denied. Redirect the moment. Remind the person who really holds their life. Speak to who they are becoming and leave them a way to turn without getting shamed. And that is the shock of the whole scene. The person everybody would call weaker is the strongest voice in the chapter because she is the only one in it not being pushed around by impulse. And the real miracle isn't only that Abigail speaks well, it's that David actually listens. David's first response matters a lot. He blesses the Lord. He blesses Abigail's judgment. And then he says it plainly. You have kept me this day from blood guilt and from avenging myself with my own hand. He does not pretend he was merely being firm. He admits he was wrong. There is one reason David remains such a complex and compelling figure in Scripture. David's strength here is not that he never loses control. It is that truth can still reach him before his anger becomes irreversible action. He can still stop mid-motion and turn around. Back at the house, the scene turns darkly ironic. Nabal is inside, feasting like a king, drunk and loud, while judgment had nearly passed his front door that same night. Abigail waits until morning, until the wine is out of him, and then she tells him what happened. She tells him what his mouth almost cost, and the text says his heart died within him, and he became like a stone. But he doesn't die right there. There's a pause, 10 days of silence, and what happens in that silence is almost as important as what happened on the mountain. Because the story is about to show you something David was about to grab for himself and how God handled it instead. The chapter slows down here. You can almost feel the house go quiet. Then the text speaks theologically. The Lord struck Nabal and he died. David did not settle it. God did. What David was about to grab in rage, the Lord handled without David's sword. This is a description of what the narrator says happened to Nabal, not a universal promise that God will visibly strike everyone who mistreats us. David was not authorized to appoint himself judge, jury, and executioner. By turning back, he left judgment outside his own hands. And that should be the end of the story. But the next few verses are more complicated than most sermons let on. Pause and picture this scene. Then David sends for Abigail, and she becomes his wife. And this is where the story refuses to stay tidy. Yes, there is providence here. Yes, there may be possible protection and household security for Abigail, but there is also politics, tribal ties, clan ties, and the plain fact that marriage in this world carried survival, status, and power along with affection. So hold both sides. David may truly see God's hand in this, and the marriage may also, as a plausible inference, strengthen his position. Abigail makes a decision within the constrained social realities of her world, where marriage affected safety, household belonging, status, and political alliance. I don't want to turn her into a prop in David's rise or a fairy tale prize at the end. She is a wise woman making costly moves in a violent world. And look at the irony. She stops David from acting like a small, bitter ruler. And by doing that, she helps clear the road toward his actual kingship, not by feeding his pride, but by restraining it. This is some wisdom for this Women's Month. And that tension between providence and politics, between wisdom and ambition, didn't disappear when the chapter ended. It's sitting in church leadership meetings every week. So say it plainly, Abigail didn't get in the way of David's future. She protected David's future from David. Sometimes the person correcting you is not resisting what God wants to do in your life. Sometimes they are the only reason you don't wreck it. And look at what the text honors in her. Courage, speed, discernment, honest speech, costly generosity, and a deep awareness of God. She sees the danger first, tells the truth plainly, and acts before pride turns into something harder to clean up later. That is wise womanhood right there. Not decoration, not silence, strength with clarity. Now bring that into church life, because the issue gets current fast. Churches get dangerous when Nabals can't be questioned, when Davids can't be corrected, and when Abigails get praised after the mess but are ignored before it. You've probably seen the modern version. A pastor gets questioned in a church meeting. Not screamed at, questioned. Then the following Sunday, the sermon shifts. The text is biblical, but the tone isn't pastoral anymore. Now, addressing real sin or conflict from the pulpit is not automatically retaliation. The danger begins when a leader uses a biblical platform to punish an identifiable critic, to avoid honest conversation, or to rally the congregation against someone who cannot answer from the same platform. People in the room start looking at each other because everybody knows who the someone is really aimed at. Nobody says it out loud, but the whole church can feel it. There's a church without an Abigail, a church with a leader who has turned the pulpit into payback. So here's the question nobody in the room wants to ask. Who's brave enough to be Abigail when the leader is wrong? Have you ever been in that position? This pattern can also unfold around a leader who has one clear-headed person willing to warn him. She warns him that the way he's handling criticism will cost him people he loves and stain years of good work. He brushes it off, calls it overreaction, and keeps pushing. A year later, the team is split. The trust is gone, and he admits too late that she saw it long before he did. That's the cost of not listening when grace comes to stop you. And by the way, this doesn't only happen in pulpits. It happens in marriages, families, workplaces, and friendships when pride matters more than truth. Now hear this clearly. Abigail's courage is not a universal command for an endangered person to confront a violent individual alone. Biblical peacemaking may require boundaries, witnesses, lawful protection, pastoral support, and immediate help when danger exists. Abigail is not a template for staying in abuse or enabling evil. So ask yourself two questions. Where is your pride still holding a sword you told yourself to put down? And who around you has been brave enough to warn you, but you didn't want to hear it? Here's the Abigail challenge. Pick one conflict in your life where pride, silence, anger, or confusion could do real damage if it keeps growing. Then do 4 things. Pause, pray, seek wise counsel, and take one peacemaking step in the next 7 days. That step might be an apology. It might be an honest talk. It might be correcting a lie you helped to spread. It might be warning someone you love that their anger is taking them somewhere dark. Wisdom that never steps into conflict is only admiration, not obedience. Some of God's sharpest mercy comes through people who stop us before our anger writes a future we cannot undo. So which is harder for you? Having the courage to speak like Abigail or the humility to listen like David? This week, identify one conflict where pride is increasing the damage. Pause, pray, seek wise counsel, then take one truthful, peaceable step. And remember, peacemaking never requires you to remain in danger or to conceal abuse. Subscribe for biblical teaching that confronts pride and builds wisdom. Abigail did not oppose David's destiny by correcting him. She helped save it from the man carrying it. Check out this playlist on women who changed history in the Bible.